This is a very interesting couple of minutes from Donald Trump because I think it could be applicable to Ireland as well. And it begs a couple of questions from people too, so we'll have a listen.
When I'm re-elected, I will do everything I can to support parents who make the courageous choice of homeschool. Under the Trump tax cuts, we allowed families to use 529 education savings accounts to spend up to $10,000 a year tax-free on tuition for grades K through 12. This was a tremendous win for school choice, very important, school choice, remember that term. And yet that benefit did not apply to homeschoolers. So to support the growing homeschool movement, in my next term, I will immediately fight to allow homeschool parents the same incredible benefit, $10,000 a year per child, completely tax-free to spend on costs associated with homeschool education. I will also work to ensure that every homeschool family is entitled to full access to the benefits available to non-homeschool students, including participating in athletic programs, clubs, after-school activities, educational trips, and more. To every homeschool family, I will be your champion. Do not vote Democrat. They are looking.
So what is interesting about that is two things. Number one is the rhetoric that Trump is using in describing people who choose to homeschool. Usually, I think the kind of knee-jerk reaction to people homeschooling is, well, do the kids not need to be socialised and all that stuff? There's some sort of initial off-puttedness to it, right? If that's not even a term, but there's a bit of a revulsion, right? People they don't see it as something they should be looking towards or aimed at, right? But what Trump says is the courageous people who choose to homeschool. So there's changing the way people might associate homeschool, right? So the second thing then is the tax allowances or the tax breaks that people who are homeschooling will be getting. Naturally, that's America, and they'll do things their way if that's what their aim was. But what's important in what Trump is saying is that it demonstrates that there is the ability, it can be done, to allow for parents who want to homeschool their children, for that to be made more affordable, basically, right? So if government so will it, if the people so will it, right? So I suppose the question it begs then is, if it was more affordable for you to do, if you didn't necessarily have to be so constrained by your finances and the limitations that working hours might put on the free time you would have to homeschool your kids, if that wasn't necessarily a concern and you could get by just as you're doing now, if not a little bit better, by homeschooling, would you want to do that? Would you take up that option? Would that be something you'd be interested in? Because if the answer is yes, then where there's a will, there's a mean. Where there's a will, there's a way, right? And if the answer is no, then that begs another question of what exactly are we doing? What is it we're aimed at if we wouldn't be willing to homeschool our kids if it was just as costly as our current way of living is, or if it was even cheaper, right? So that's a fascinating one. It's an interesting one, and I think, look, all things are starting to will roll downstream from America. So Trump is speaking about potentially eliminating income tax and funding the state through the tariffs that they'd impose on foreign nations and the goods that they bring into the country. And now he's talking about the homeschooling thing as well, right? So there is a leader. So he's making things a bit more equal, right, or a bit more balanced. So he's in those two things alone. So making it more affordable to homeschool your kids and bring your kids up in the vision that you would want them to be developing in, right? And also getting to hold on to some of your own money. So those two things will make people far more self-reliant and self-sufficient than they probably had the possibility of being in decades, if not centuries, right? So, which is a positive thing. A self-sufficient people is a confident people, right? Is a If you don't have to worry about getting fired because you make your living, or you don't have to worry about not being able to pay your debts because you've been able to hold on to more of the money that you create and the wealth you create, so you're not exactly short anymore, right? And you have the ability to homeschool and educate your children in the way you would wish to. That can only lead one way, and that is towards a stronger, more confident, and strong people, and a strong nation, a more assertive people, like a people that have a bit more self-belief about them. So interesting, and we'll see what comes of that in America. And regardless of what happens in America, I think that is where we should be aiming. Because if you don't want to educate your kids, or if you would turn away from the option of educating your kids, I don't know if you're a parent yet, if that makes sense.